Yeah, I mean, on the one hand, I think the fragmentation is a reflection of maturity. I mean, the industry is moving at a really fast pace. And you heard Aaron talk about it during his part of the keynote, talking about the pace of innovation over the last 10 years. But the other side of it is that we have technology that sort of have bridged those ecosystem gaps on the desktop. And what's happening is those technologies are transferring into mobile. And this, like we talked about last year, it would be that sort of HTML5 space of actually being able to deliver services and applications in a cross-platform browser environment, and then that cuts across all those ecosystems. Now, that still is getting up to speed. When we talked a year ago, I thought, if we were going to be here a year later, that HTML5 would have progressed a little bit further, but it's making a lot of movement, but it's not quite where I could say, hey, that's the platform that's going to solve all the problems. The fragmentation is more of a segmentation than it is actually some sort of problem that is caused sort of for lack of no better reason. This isn't because people are being careless or because they're trying to actually build something that isn't compatible. Every now and then you make a design choice. If you're trying to build that device that's going to fit let's go sub $80, you're not going to use the same display that you might use in the developed market, and that's going to cause, whether you think that's fragmentation or not, to some ways of building your application, dealing with the different screen sizes and resolutions will be perceived as fragmentation. Other people won't. Depends on how you write your application. So,
well, a logical thing would be HTML5, right? We've talked about that. We talked about it last year. What I'd like to understand now is, a year on, what progress has been made in HTML5 to solve some of these cross-platform issues? Because to me, it's a good long-term opportunity with HTML5, and it could get bigger, right?
Right. I mean, I think we've seen a couple of things in the last year. We've seen things happen in the cloud, stuff like the Amazon Cloud Reader, demonstrating the kind of services that you can deliver in HTML5. We've seen a lot of really rich applications start to come out. And more importantly, we started to see a shift in the developer tools environments, where you saw Adobe buy PhoneGap. And think about, instead of building applications solely out of Flash, maybe I'm going to have the output of Creative Suite actually let me more easily build applications that manage and run in an HTML5 environment. But there's a gap between what you think of as an HTML5 environment and what developers think of as an application environment. Sort of things like PhoneGap fill that. Sorry, not to be a pun. Fill that gap, and they do it in a way that actually blurs the distinction between the different runtimes and the different browsers or in the different operating systems. Much the same as that we would go take Ruby on Rails and the development environments around that on the website and use it to smooth out any sort of distinctions between the browsers as HTML5 itself became more standardized. Yeah, so I think it's a blend of things that are already in HTML5 but haven't classically implemented in the mobile environment. So when you talk about things like web workers, which is the ability to have background tasks running in a JavaScript HTML5 environment, that capability exists in all the desktop browsers and most of the major ones, but doesn't exist in the default mobile ones. Well, we can layer that into things like the Android browser or work with other partners to put it into other environments. So you can actually build these applications that actually can do things in the background, but yet they're implemented like websites. There are access to other device features that I think are really important to mobile applications. Things as simple as the camera, straightforward as a camera. We've demonstrated that with some of the things at the CodeFest, where we gave people an environment that gave them access to the camera and the web and saw what applications you could build with that. I think sensors are actually going to be something that you're going to need. I mean, look at the explosion that happened when you got location into the browser and how that changed HTML applications and services when they became location aware. That was a very straightforward thing to do. Well, to get to that next level of access, I think that the promising ones are probably camera and sensors. At least to me they are. Facebook wants to be on everything and everywhere, and the platform itself has grown up in the HTML5 or in the HTML world. I mean, Facebook wouldn't be Facebook unless it had grown up as this client-server architecture where, when they decide they want to change a feature or they want to test something, they can send it out to millions of people, see if it works, see if this version A works, version B works, tweak all that, and iterate. And that iteration cycle is very, very different than, hey, download my Facebook app. Oh, I'm going to try two new things. Oh, tomorrow I want you to download a different version of the app. So they see a technical solution that they want because they want to drive a certain user experience and continue to drive that experience. Now, Right now, HTML5 is not just driven by W3C. I would argue HTML5 is also driven by whoever contributes to WebKit. Right? And the one thing about the web is that if you build it and spread it, and WebKit is one of the best ways to do that, you can actually change the way that people think about the web. When Google put out their the O3D extension, which was the precursor to WebGL, it made people think about what would it be like to actually have OpenGL graphics in the browser, 3D graphics in the browser. That implementation that they did never became the standard, but it caused WebGL to happen in Kronos and the rest of W3C cooperating. So I think Facebook is actually going to drive and be the pressure point for it, but I think the real work is likely to come with the people that work on WebKit. And right, I mean, so if you think about Akamai's role in the web that we have today, and primarily services delivered on the desktop, let's just hold to that. Akamai solved a problem where if you start to depend on HTML5 content and including a lot of rich graphics, you want to get that content to the edge of the network as close to your customer as possible, as close to the person using as possible, to deal with the fact that the internet is a thing that has delays and doesn't have always a constant time for getting things, but yet you want to drive this smooth user experience. Right, so they spent a lot of time thinking about how to do that on what I would consider the wired internet, right? The desktop all the way to your home, to your office, and a lot of companies around the world drive a lot of traffic. Facebook, for example, drives a lot of traffic through Akamai's CDN. We've sort of stopped at one link that was one of the most challenging, which is that wireless link, that last bit before the mobile device. And one of the things we've been doing is work with Akamai, and there are a couple other companies that, as some other things standardize, you've seen Google talking about Speedy and other kinds of optimizations. We want to make sure that it gets implemented at the system level. You heard us talking a little bit before about our system. Paul talked about our system level approach. Well, one way to take an approach to speed things up is to just work on what we control and have influence over, which is control. I think is perhaps too strong a word.
Don't be shy.
No, you better be shy. Because you should try controlling an open source project. The things that we can influence are on the device, but yet the things that we can do on the device can be amplified by a couple orders of magnitude if it actually has cooperation in the network. So we've realized this, Google's realized this, Microsoft realized this. You even see Opera has done this here with what they did with Opera Mini. They've talked about optimizing that last link. What we just announced with Akamai is a broad framework for saying at the edges of these CDN networks, we're going to work to make sure that the edge of our connection to the internet through HTTP is going to be optimized in a way that things will just happen faster and better around the world. And at first, we think, especially on Snapdragon-enabled devices. HTML5, as an example, gives you a way of building those scaled experiences that do constraint-based layout and all kinds of other things that let you drive it. Now, the other thing I think that is important to think about with tablets that is, I think, coming new this year since we last talked is the way the operators are starting to think about multiple devices. Okay. So you can talk about whether or not you think we should have a phone or a tablet, and I think we probably have many devices. And we'll see form factors that are more purpose-built for what we want. And what we're starting to see is operators blend together access charges so that I can have this plethora of devices and actually choose the device that I want to work on. If I'm trying to create something, if I'm trying to consume media, I might want to use this form factor, I might want to use another form factor. But I don't want to actually have 8 different data plans to do that. And the operators are starting to see that. And we from our side are starting to see penetration rates that are higher than 100% in some markets because people will have a phone and they'll have a tablet and they'll have a connected line. The difference between a service and an app, it's actually hard for me to distinguish between those two. One way you might cut that line is an app sort of exists by itself and a service maybe always is being updated, connected to the cloud. We certainly believe in the connected experience. So if that's an app or if that's a service, I don't know how to draw the distinction. We do see the trend going from things that you download and interact with and don't have to be connected to everything that you do needing to be connected because that's the way you're going to get the experience that you want. Well, there's actually the art of being a good tools developer, right, is actually getting to a place where you're cross-platform without having to go to the least common denominator. If you think about the gaming industry, there's a class of games that you will always write, for lack of a better term, bare to the metal. right? You want to be, they're going to really push the limits of the hardware, they're going to push the limits of the software framework. You may want to build your own physics engine for it because it is that big of a, and they're big franchises that are built that way. And then there's a set of gaming which actually benefits from being built on top of a platform. And we talked, you know, we had one of the big guys from Unity here, and that's an example of an engine that has said, we are going to handle the cross-platform part of it. You handle thinking about the semantics of your game. What's the gameplay? What's the experience? And we've actually leveraged that with our Vuforia project, for example. So you can take Vuforia and you can put it in your C application. You can sort of have a raw access to what we did with augmented reality primitives. Or you can take the metaphor that we built that says, these are a subset of those kinds of interactions, but we still think probably 80% of augmented reality applications could be built this way. And you build it inside of the Unity engine instead of starting from scratch. It makes another tick in terms of how many developers can access this now, how fast we can turn around applications. We're thinking about what's the next step beyond that, which is more like the step that Adobe early on took with Creative Suite and Flash, which is now I want to make it so people that aren't even programmers can build what people think of as applications. And we're trying to think of as, if in this is in the Vuforia context, how can I take Vuforia and bring it to people that aren't even programmers who want to build retail applications or marketing applications, and what they really work in is the world of HTML and JavaScript, and they can deal with that, but they don't want to do any more programming than that. So that's on our roadmap, but it's I think what you're hitting at with the cross-platform is that for classes and genres of applications, you can build these tools and build them, I think, quite effectively. I think, first of all, that the cloud-based recognition, or cloud-based RECO, as Jay called it this morning, is something that, unless you really think about what we're trying to do, you don't understand the importance of it. It's not so much that we need stuff to be in the cloud because just putting the word cloud on it makes it a better application, which is what some people think. The point there is that devices, and this maybe has something to do with the way I think about wireless, devices are, and the device that I held in my hand is going to be a subset of the experience of everything that I know. My data is going to be sprinkled through multiple devices, parts of the cloud, even for recognition applications. So the team in Vienna, which is where I was, which is where our augmented reality team is sort of focused, is really working on a couple of things related to how to make that cloud-based recognition. How to say, I'm going to look around through this room and I'm going to be able to figure out fast enough to have an experience that users can like. I'm going to figure out something of interest, and that thing of interest will cause a user experience to happen. And if you think about that and think about what you have to do, because remember, we're doing this 30 frames a second, right? So this isn't something that we can take a lot of time and calculate. So we're doing it. There's a lot of work in that. So it's hard to get into the sort of low-level algorithms. But there again, the team is taking a systems approach. They've spent a lot of time and have a lot of expertise in computer vision. Now they're saying, how does that tie back over a wireless network, back into a server, and we build this experience that actually is something that consumers will love, right? And we're still working on it. And but what I saw, which is a little later stuff than what we showed today, keeps getting faster and faster, and it's going to give developers tools that are really rich.
So it's the immediacy that you say would be the thing.
It's the immediacy. It's the fact that every time we iterate this platform, we get it to compute better using less power, so it can build more experiences that don't change the mobile device. And we think the primitives that we're building in computer vision, whether it's the underneath layer that we call FastTV, which we'd like to see across multiple platforms, it's a set of interesting computer vision algorithms that you might use for many things, or it's the full-blown augmented reality stuff. We just want to continue to make that better so that other people can build experiences on top of them, right? So it's hard to say what's more exciting than that. We're going to take computer vision and we're going to apply it to a bunch of areas, and some people are surprised to hear that Qualcomm is doing that, but we think we have the computation power of these devices to drive extraordinary experiences. And I think one of the things Paul has said for a long time is that the next generation of wireless systems aren't going to be about what's 4G, 5G, 6G are going to be improvements to one physical layer, one radio. What they are is how to manage all these things that I'm talking to, all these different radios, because we're getting to the point with our technology, and I would argue in clouds also, that there are things that are going to be purpose-built, or they're going to be around a particular market segment, or they're going to be a brand relationship that I have. So I have my relationship with Instagram, I have my relationship with Facebook, I have my relationship with my hospital. Those, you can view those all as clouds of data that I want to have access to. What we would look to do as a platform provider, which is really how I think of Qualcomm and all of this, is try to build security elements that everyone can use, try to build building blocks so that people can actually make the interactions happen in a way that we think correlates to the experience that people want to talk to. So when you talk about cloud and you talk about all these other things, you say there are multiple clouds. One of the clouds that I really think about is the personal cloud, that is the things in my house, right? So if I want to be able to interact with my photographs and my music and all my family members around me and all that, but I don't necessarily want to share that, or I may not want to put it into another service, I'm going to want to interact with the devices that are around me in my house. And that's when we were talking about AllJoin earlier today, and we've talked about it a little last year. That's an example of another communications platform technology that bridges between these multiple sources of information in a cross-platform, cross-operating system, cross-device way that will build an ecosystem up. So there's the cloud, which is the internet, and then we think there's a cloud which is very personal and proximal, and we think the protocol for that is yet to be defined. And we have a proposal for it. That's AllJoin. And we'd, by the way, be happy to hear from anybody who would like to tell us how to make AllJoin better, or better yet, even contribute code to making AllJoin better, because we're trying to solve a real problem there, a piece that we think is missing in this cross-platform environment. Getting into a market that is maturing, and what we have a retailing platform, or a set of retailing platforms that haven't perhaps caught up to the scale of the environment that they're in. I mean, we got to a point, if Amazon could only handle the number of apps that people think they can do discovery on very well, it would be very difficult to drive the kind of retail experience that they drive, or any of the other online presences. So I think that we're going to see further segmentation in the marketplaces, where people were actually going to build more special purpose-built marketplaces, whether or not you actually drive the actual download and monetization. Like right now we combine discovery, monetization, and the actual bits that make up the application itself are all glommed together into one concept. And I think those things are going to be separated. So you may go back to searching the internet, finding reviews of these apps, and then I think it could swing back that way because of the scale. You know, when somebody says, go find me a website that does that, they don't necessarily go to a curated marketplace for that. Because in all honesty, we know that there's enough ambiguity and enough different choices out there that we are probably the best person to make that choice for ourselves. Some other people, some other kinds of things, a curated marketplace is exactly the right thing. So one way of thinking about it is that you're going to embody all that experience into a central location, as it were, or intelligence. The TV or some peripheral blocks. And I just don't see it, because we go through so many devices in our daily lives. We think about the interactions that are going to change. And I don't think the hardware is what we should base that experience on. So, for example, you talk about, well, is it the TV that's going to drive that experience? Well, maybe I have gesture controls on my TV, and I'm still not sure I want to change channels by going like this. But instead, I think you're going to build a collaboration between devices that have a user experience or user interface that works for the thing you're trying to do, and communicate with other devices that control them, right? And that is, you're right, I was going to bring up AllJoin, is one of the ways we see AllJoin. The Vuforia stuff, augmented reality, is actually, to me, the other side of the coin for that. One thing is about, if I have things in the world around me that are proximal to me, how can I actually do command and control to them? That's an AllJoin protocol thing. But the other thing is, I want to look at the world around me and understand what things are possible. I can build user experiences using vision-based augmented reality that say, oh, I can take my phone, point at the TV, and say, put this photograph there, right?
Or you can listen to the TV.
Or you can listen to the TV. Or I can have an interaction where I can use that to, say, build relationships between the different devices in my house. What's one of the hardest things to do, well, at least for people that are trying on the cutting edge of doing this? You want to build this really cool connected home experience. You get the device home and you have to figure out how to get it on your Wi-Fi network. It doesn't have it doesn't have a screen on it, so you have to do all these arcane things to do it. Keeps it from being a mass market device and a mass market experience. So we have to find a way for these things to talk to each other in a way where the device that has the best experience, which I will argue is going to be the mobile phone for a long time, because it has your credentials, it has connectivity to the internet, it has a bunch of services and applications that can be downloaded onto it, obviously. Trying to do that and sort of have that serve as the remote control of the world around you, there's some technical building blocks that we're working on, I think, that could actually make that happen in reality, so that you don't have to have this vertically oriented world, right? I was just at Computex in Taipei a couple of weeks ago, and I watched 2 or 3 television manufacturers say, and what we've put into our next generation of smart television is the ability to throw a picture onto the TV screen. And so manufacturer A had their Android application, C had their Android application. So if I have 3 TVs at my house, I'd have to have a different application and user experience for every one of those. But it's kind of a fundamental basic experience. Why can't we build some standardized services on top of a common protocol and then have everybody in the ecosystem do interesting things with it? If we do that, I think we can actually get past this 10-foot UI problem, because maybe the 10-foot UI problem is the same UI I have right here talking over 10 feet, right? Rather than me having to build it the other way. Yeah, I mean, I think what we see is, there's sort of 2 sides to open source that you can think about from if you want to think about it from a classic Qualcomm perspective. We used to say, invent things and want to cause the ecosystem happen by building standards that we collaborated on with our partners, and then we all competed with each other to build the best implementations. A lot of the wireless technologies are built that way, So other people make chips, other people make infrastructure, other people make handsets, with various points in the company's life, and builds an ecosystem by saying we're going to build an ecosystem around this common thing that we all agree on. In the software world, differently than the world of radio, that often happens now by open source. You say, I'm going to work on the web. And if you really look back at how HTML5 came about, it came about by people collaborating on WebKit and then taking it into W3C when they understood that this thing we're building is actually a useful thing. And that's what we see happening now. We get to help guide and have an opinion about what is the next useful thing. And we also get the benefit of other really smart people in the industry. And we go in, eyes wide open, contributing intellectual property is necessary to where we participate. And we think it actually helps the entire ecosystem. And it's something that is actually great for all. When we first optimized WebKit on ARM, the things we upstreamed made WebKit run better on every ARM processor out there, not just Snapdragon. But it was a conscious choice that we made because we thought the ecosystem actually needed to take that step up, and we were ready to contribute to that. The other, for us, what it allows us to do too is differentiate on the things that are really meaningful for us to differentiate. Right? And that's what I think a lot of people use open source for. Is like, let's take a common platform. We all know how to write kernels now, right? I mean, there are other kernels than the Linux kernel, but for a lot of applications, it's a pretty good kernel. Let's not spend our time implementing another one, as an example.
Yeah.
Let's innovate on UI or augmented reality or something else. And that's what lets us stand on the shoulders of giants. And open source is a component of that. It's a part of our life now. We're working on iOS ports for AllJoyn and also Windows Phone and Windows 8. The relationship, we see a strong relationship between AllJoyn and Wi-Fi Direct, for example. So as Wi-Fi Direct rolls out, I think it's going to really help build some of the experiences we want. For places like PhoneGap, that's part of why the project is open source. I think what you're asking is, when are we going to create bindings into those application environments? We have proposed JavaScript bindings for AllJoyn that we've played with. PhoneGap could pick those up at any time. We'd be happy to work with them, with the Debbie on that. But we're more right now working on getting the low-level building blocks working in the different operating systems, and we've got language. We've got ways of expressing it in the different languages on all those platforms. You can build an Objective-C application in the alpha prototype that we have, and so forth. So you'll start seeing those, I think, rolling out over the next year. And we'd love to have you help us do it. That's what open source is about.